Hey folks, with us today, Kyle from Proposify. Super happy to have you on, Kyle.
Thanks, Nikolas. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Let's start with the most important thing. What problem does Proposify solve for its customers?
Problem we solve is when a company is growing their sales force, they typically get into a position where they start to lose control over the documents that sales reps are sending out. So typically proposals, quotes, contracts will go out the door. They usually have some sort of approval process in place, but it just becomes very chaotic managing it through Word and PDF. And so sometimes deals go out with the wrong information or the wrong pricing or the wrong terms or that sort of thing. So usually they'll look at Proposify when they are growing their sales team and they need to get more control and more visibility into what sales reps are sending out to their prospects. That's what we solve.
And is there a specific industry that has like the biggest pain in that, or are you quite broad in terms of the industries you serve?
We're quite broad. We serve a number of industries, although the ones that we tend to have the most volume of customers within tend to be services businesses. We kind of break them into blue collar and white collar. So think IT, consulting, development, sometimes marketing agencies would be that white collar service. But then on the blue collar side, a lot of franchises, a lot of B2B franchises that maybe do like contractor work, landscaping, parking lot maintenance, anything where they'll send trucks out to a home.
Yeah. And then on the scale from like mom and pop shop and SMB to mid-market to enterprise, where do you usually sit in there?
We started out serving very small customers, and that was how we found initial product market fit, was through very small digital marketing agencies. But over the years, we've moved up market, and now our target customers more on the larger size. So we serve large SMBs, mid-market, and some enterprises. We'll use Proposify, and that's kind of more the direction we're heading.
I love that. And I would love to dig deeper on that because you're 9 years in, so you have tons of learnings on who to go after, how to go after those people. Would you start with the lower end of the market and the smaller companies again if you would do it all over, or would you go right after the enterprise?
A fantastic question, and I think there's a lot there. It's generally easier to target small customers at the beginning because they are more open to trying new tools that are unproven, that are buggy, or don't have all the features. So they're very fast to acquire and typically quite easy to acquire, especially if the price point is low. That starts to catch up with you over time because those same customers that are fast to switch will switch to something else or free tools, or as your category starts to grow, more competition will come out. So that's typically once churn becomes a problem, and you only really notice churn becoming a problem after the first few million in revenue. It's very easy to ignore it in the early days, but it starts to really catch up with you and compound later on. That's typically where SaaS companies try to move up market. And I think there's a lot of learnings we could dig into, if you like, on how to move up market and how to figure out that enterprise play or that sales motion. But the flip side of it is starting out enterprise or starting out serving very big companies. And that's an approach that can work too. I personally haven't tried that, but what's working against most companies if they try to start out enterprise is just simply the lack of stability, integrations, privacy, security, and all those types of things that enterprises want to see. And they want to see a proven track record. So that becomes challenging. I think that there could be a case to be made if you have come from a very large enterprise and you're starting a SaaS business, knowing exactly the problem and the pain points that you solve, and being able to say, hey, look, I've lived in these shoes. I've been a corporate VP at a 10,000 person company, and I know exactly what problem to solve. Sure, go out and build that solution because you know what it is. But if you haven't walked in those shoes, it's going to be hard to sell it.
Yeah. I feel like it's for a lot of companies like the natural progression to get bigger clients as they get bigger themselves. And I would love to really dig into it because you mentioned the transition. How how big were you in terms of both revenue, like roughly, and headcount when you made the switch to, hey, let's try to go after the bigger fish now?
It was a very slow, progressive transition. So it's hard to say exactly where we were at, but I want to say we were at about a couple of million in revenue when we started to just experiment with higher price points and to hire our first sales reps. That would have been around 2016. That there was a lot of stuff we didn't know, and so it was very experimental. It wasn't we hadn't made the decision, oh, we're going to transition towards enterprise. It was very much a, hey, let's play around with this and see if there's something there. We had more or less copied Basecamp's price point. They had a 3,000 a year plan they were selling. We tried that and we sold a couple of them, and we thought at the time that those were very big customers. Wow, 3,000 a year. We were used to selling $20 a month customers. But it was interesting where it went, because we were able to eventually close customers that, some now pay us six figures and more. But that was very gradual, and there was a lot of pain and a lot of stumbling along the way to get there.
Do you feel like it was the right decision to start rather small in terms of the price and very experimental, instead of making maybe not the rational, but like the more trying to plan ahead approach of saying, now we're going after the enterprise, let's chase six-figure deals?
I think it's the right approach to start small and experiment, especially if you have an engine that's working, right? And we had a lot of really good growth from small customers. Our self-service sort of product-led growth engine was very, very sticky, and that was where our growth was coming from. That's the right time to experiment with another channel or another customer segment. The approach I would take would be different next time. And I wouldn't hire salespeople off the bat. I would do the sales myself. Me and my co-founder probably could have done that for a year to experiment, rather than bringing outside reps in, trying to train them on a sales process or a sales motion that we really had no experience running ourselves. So I would do that differently. And I think through the course of doing that, we would have discovered some of the objections that you face when you get these bigger customers on calls, like, how does your Salesforce integration work? And how, do you guys have SOC 2 compliance? Do you have single sign-on? Like all these types of like security, privacy type of requirements at that stage. We would have faced those as the founders, and that would have helped inform the product more. I think the way we did it was just slower. It just there was too many layers in between us and the customer. And so we didn't learn as quickly as we could have.
At that point, why did you not make the decision to do it yourself? Because I guess you had the thought in your mind back then. So for the founder listening who's in that position right now, he wants to go that direction, but was it more like, oh no, I don't have time, or I hate sales? Like, what made you not do it? And like, why do you regret it now?
Both of those reasons you mentioned. Don't have time and I hate sales. But I think there's more to it than that. So I actually don't hate sales, but sales is a grind, and it is time consuming, and there's a lot of rejection, especially if we're doing kind of outbound prospecting, which we try to do a little bit of. That just takes a long time. And so when things are working and growth is good and the team's growing and we're just busy with other things, very easy and very tempting to just want to outsource that. Let's just bring somebody in, let them do it. They've got the time, the hours to put into it. I think fundamentally, though, it is a mistake. And yeah, I think you're denying yourself the firsthand knowledge and learning that you could get. And also, it's just expensive to bring salespeople on who can't close deals, who you're paying them a base salary. But obviously, if they're not hitting numbers consistently, they're not happy. It's much better for everybody if you, as the founder, have said, okay, for the last 6 months, I've been taking 3 days or 2 days a week to focus on sales, to bring in some higher ticket prospects. And through the course of doing that, we've learned where we fall short in terms of product, where maybe our positioning should change, or just how to price it, because our pricing was limiting us too. Just the metric that we were pricing by was limiting the ability to sell six-figure deals. With that knowledge and with some customers that we were able to successfully close, we could have at that point brought in sales reps and said, hey, shadow us for X number of weeks, watch us do it, take some calls yourselves, we'll coach you and train you, and then get 1 or 2 reps closing deals. And then at that point, if it's working, if you can get some outside reps to close because you've figured out, you've at least built a foundation for them to be somewhat successful with, then that's the point where you want to bring in, say, a head of sales, a director, or a VP to build the team and grow it. You don't want to do that early on when you haven't even figured out how to close big deals. And that's the mistake that I see a lot of SaaS founders want to make. I coach a couple of SaaS founders as well. And, I see them fall into that trap as well. I need a head of sales. How many customers do you close? None. They're not going to figure that out for you.
Yeah.
Right. Head of sales come in and they take the engine that's there and they get it faster and hotter, and they grow the team. They train, they coach reps. They don't figure out product market fit. They don't figure out your positioning or fix your product for you. And so then what SaaS founders do is they bring in a head of sales. They can't make their team successful, and then they get rid of them in 12 to 18 months and go, no, I tried sales. It doesn't work.
That makes a ton of sense. So in summary, doing founder-led sales, basically learning the ropes, making the rough mistakes, making the adjustments, bringing in the first 2 reps. And when they're successful, then bring in the leadership layer. Correct?
Correct. It's an approach that's been proven to work.
If you need to hire the right developers and ship fast, then React Squad is for you. A boutique agency that specializes in React and only works with fast growth startups. Get a 14-day risk-free trial and a transparent price of $95 per hour. Visit reactsquad.io to learn more.
How does your sales right now? Are you roughly 60 employees, or how big is the company right now?
Yeah, we're about 60.
How many of those are in the sales org today?
We have with us today 4 AEs, account executives, who close, and then we have 2 BDRs, and then we have a director of sales.
Got it. And then are the BDRs basically setting appointments for the AE? So it's like 2 AEs share 1 BDR, or how does that the mechanics work of that sales engine?
We've structured this a few different ways, but last year we made a change and we actually had the BDRs report into marketing. So Nadia is our VP of marketing.
Interesting.
Oversees and coaches the BDRs, and they essentially handle all the inbound leads. So when somebody requests a demo through the website, the BDRs will jump on that first call, run some basic discovery, and then if they see there's a good fit, they'll set the appointment for the AE. And that actually has worked well for us. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. And I think there's certainly pros and cons of having BDRs report into marketing versus sales. But for us, it seems to be working. And what it has helped with is created a very tight feedback loop between people sort of on the ground floor talking to prospects, feeding that information back to marketing to say, these leads are no good. We can't help them. They're too big. They're too small. They don't understand what we do. Whatever it happens to be, they provide that feedback to marketing, who can then tighten and refine the messaging of what we're putting out there in terms of campaigns and content.
And then I guess sales has a quota, but does marketing have, or at least marketing leadership have like some kind of quota in terms of how many qualified leads they have to push to sales monthly or quarterly?
Yeah, marketing has a pipeline quota. So we don't do it in terms of number of leads because lead size and quality can vary. We also score leads, A, fit, B fit. So marketing instead has a pipeline quota that they're able to hit. And generally speaking, it's about 5 times what sales quota is. So you want about 5 times the quota coverage in terms of pipeline.
And then, because you briefly mentioned before that you tried outbound. So did you try outbound versus SEO versus some other channel, and then it just ended up being inbound? Or like, how did you end up on being inbound driven? At least if I understood that correctly. Take us a bit about the other part of basically how do the BDRs get their leads, and how did that evolve historically?
Yeah, I mean, if we go way back to when we hired our first reps, we hired a third rep, Scott, who's funny enough now our director of sales. He's been with us that long. And he was doing a lot of prospecting and outbound. We didn't have a process figured out for it though. And it took us a long time to sort of figure what that is. But we haven't given up on it. We still do a fair amount of outbound. What we've found, at least lately, is that the AEs do the majority of the outbound. BDRs a little bit, but it tends to stay mostly with the AEs. So essentially, and Scott's been a big proponent and a big believer in outbound for as long, really, he's been with us. So he encourages the AEs and leads by example in terms of just making sure that every day or every week we're doing some kind of outbound prospecting activity. It doesn't necessarily drive the pipeline. About 20% of the deals that we close come from outbound, but 80% come from inbound. So the inbound engine is still the one that's providing the majority of the pipeline and the majority of the value. Now that said, outbound can work. It does work. I wouldn't say we've gotten it down to a science where we could just say plug in 100 BDRs and have them produce quota for us the way a lot of SaaS founders would like it to be. But what we do find is that the deals that we close from outbound tend to be larger. So if you are going to close that big whale of a customer, it's more of a 50-50 split. So they tend to lean more on the bigger end.
So the AEs basically take the, let's say capacity they have for outbound to really go like elephant and whale hunting in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's still, even when you do that, you're likely not going to land a massive customer, at least right off the bat. Usually there tends to be some kind of a proof of concept, or they sell it to one division within the company or one team. And land and expand has been the approach that's worked well for us, and I know works for a lot of SaaS companies. Is you bring in a company, maybe it's a 10-seat deal or a 20-seat deal, but you know that there's the capacity for 300 or 500. And really that's where the partnership between customer success and sales comes in, because the customer success manager takes that 10-seat deal and over time nurtures it and grows it into that 300-seat deal.
The last time I asked that, I promised, does CS also have a quota in terms of upsells, or is customer success basically like quota-less in a way?
No, they have a quota. They have expansion targets. So their job is to expand or retain a certain amount of net MRR churn, or a certain amount of net MRR retention. So as a whole, we're aiming for about 120% in terms of revenue retention annually. So that would just break down for the CSM, how big is their book of business? Their job is to keep 100% of it and grow it by 20% annually. And so then that breaks into quarterly targets.
Makes sense. So if we look at it high level, it would be the marketing department delivering pipeline, so potential revenue, the sales department closing new MRR, new revenue, and then the customer success department making sure that revenue base grows.
You got it. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I would love to switch gears a bit from the, let's say, in the business part to more of like the being a founder part. You're at it for 9 years now. And I feel like a lot of founders get like itchy after 5 or 6 years to do something else. How do you feel about that? And what if you have that urge to like play around with other things? How do you integrate that into your job as a CEO to keep being focused while scratching that itch, basically?
I'm really glad you asked that question. I think it's an important topic. one that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. At 9 years in my previous business, I had for 5, almost 6 years. So I tend to be one of those founders who stays around a long time running a business. I'm not hey, every year or two, I need to flip whatever I'm doing and sell it to somebody and go start up again. Now, that said, I can imagine that it's very similar to musicians that have been in bands for a long time, 10, 20 years, or the Rolling Stones, if you will. They've got to get itching to try something else, to do a side project, to do a side band, but they always kind of come back to their main band. That's kind of how I feel about Proposify. Definitely have gone through periods of time where I've felt frustrated, bored, just wanted to sell it and move on and do other things. But I think the important thing there is, for any founders that are listening to this, if you can look at what you tried to accomplish initially. So when you started your business, maybe you were, in my case, it was trying to get proposal software created, trying to get that off the ground, have customers using it. Never, almost didn't think I would get to $1 million in revenue. And here we are, 10 million, and going, is that all? Like, we should be able to be even much bigger than that. But I think as long as you can keep challenging yourself and challenging your vision to say, okay, we did this, it works, good. Now, what else could we do that's even more ambitious and more crazy, if you will? So I think there's ways to almost create a startup within your existing business. And I would encourage a lot of founders to really think about that. Because the thing is, unless you happen to be one of those maniacs who just loves to be in startup grind mode all the time, let's face it, it's not a fun world to live in, right? You don't have any money, you have no team, you have to do everything. It's unproven what you're doing. Like, you don't have any real evidence that people want whatever it is you're trying to build. Whereas if you can create a startup within your existing company that already has revenue and it has an ops and finance team and it has all the infrastructure in place to feed yourself, feed your family, maybe be able to afford a great lifestyle, but then you can go, cool, now I want to build a new product within it, or I want to build a new service, or I just want to take our existing product vision and 10x it and make it, way more ambitious. That's a better place to be in. And even from a wealth building perspective, you're more likely to be successful doing one thing for a very long period of time than you will be trying to do a new business every 2 or 3 years, or even every 5 years. It's just a slower way to make money, honestly.
Did you have to play some, let's say, mental games or do a bit of mental gymnastics to get to that place? Or was that just the way you're wired, basically? And that's how you ended up sticking it out?
Yeah. I did have to do mental gymnastics to get there. I wrestled with it for a long time. And I even, seriously considered and went down the road of looking to sell the business. Now, 2 years ago, that would have been probably a fantastic idea because valuations were very frothy, and even moderately performing businesses could command huge multiples if they were SaaS. By the time I was considering this, the market had changed significantly. Valuations were down. We were entering a recession, and so suddenly it became less of a viable exit strategy. So in some ways, I'm quite glad that was the case, because essentially I thought I had a door out and the door's closed. That was not an option. So I was really left with only one option, which is keep doing this, and in fact do it 10 times better than it's going, or 10 times more ambitious a vision, or 10 times better in terms of performance and growth. So in a way, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. It was like, you only have one option and it's through. There's no way around it. And I think for other people, they may not be in that situation. So there might be some mental gymnastics involved, but I think it may take a lot of time and a lot of reflection to be able to say to yourself, is quitting or is basically trying to find a buyer for my business and trying to cash out really what I want to do. Because for anybody who's had cash windfalls before, whether it was selling shares or selling previous businesses, you kind of realize that once that initial period of excitement wears off, of like, cool, I've got a lot of money in my bank account and I can afford a fancy car or I can pay off my house. Once that goes away, you're kind of left with, okay, what do I do now? And I mean, this has been pretty well documented that the majority of entrepreneurs who sell their businesses end up depressed within the first year afterwards. And so I think, yeah, taking that into consideration and going, why do I really want to sell it now? Is it because now is the best time for the business? Because maybe we could partner with some bigger strategic firm and become much more, really fulfill the vision in a much bigger way. Typically it tends to be like, oh, I'm just, things are hard. I hate my employees. I hate where we're at. We're stuck. But the thing is, those are always going to be true. And so what I did was I kind of thought to myself, like, part of my personal vision is to become an investor. And, I've done some angel investing, but I would like to have a portfolio of businesses in SaaS and some other industries. When I looked at it and I said, okay, so what do I want to do one day? It's to take businesses that are struggling to grow and to sort of run my playbooks through them and get them to that next level. Well, if I can't even do that for myself, can't even do that for my sole business, how am I ever going to learn how to do that for other businesses? So that was part of the mental gymnastics I went through.
I love the honesty. And then, because we're running up on time, what's that 10x vision you came up with?
I want to hold that close to my chest right now. But I will say that when I look at what Proposify can be in 5 years, we've seen the power that generative AI has had on many SaaS businesses, and just, I think, SaaS in general. Probably the greatest technical revolution that we've seen since smartphones, since the internet. That is very much what the vision is rooted in, and really practical ways that AI can be leveraged to create much more robust automation for documents at scale.
I love that. And then I'm already looking forward to seeing what that ends up being when it's even more concrete.
Yeah, I'll be sharing it this year.
Amazing. I will keep stalking you to make sure I don't miss it. And then one final thing, if people want to reach out either to you or to Proposify, where can you be found online?
Sure. So, obviously, if people want to check out the software, they can. It's proposify.com. For SaaS founders who are listening, some of the content that might be more applicable for them is just my personal website, KyleRacki.com. So that's Racki, is Racki. Actually a Croatian name. My great-grandparents came from Yugoslavia. For those that are interested, I only say because you're European. But yeah, no, I have a personal website where I have a weekly newsletter. I share some of what I've learned over the years running a SaaS business that's very applicable to SaaS founders. So if people wanted to check out KyleRacki.com, they can sign up for the newsletter and can share content like this.
Perfect. And I will be sure to link it up for everyone. Kyle, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Nikolas. I really enjoyed you having me.
If you like this episode, then you'll love the SaaS Operator, a weekly newsletter brought to you by EarlyNode, with actionable insights from SaaS experts in the industry, delivered right to your inbox every Tuesday for free. Visit earlynode.com to subscribe.